Hello, and welcome to Inventors Helping Inventors. I'm your host, Alan Beckley, inventor of the Wonder Wallet. If you're an inventor searching for proven ways to make money with your invention, if you dream to see your product selling in stores everywhere, you've come to the right place. There's no better place to get help than from experts, inventors who've already achieved success. Every week, I interview successful inventors, asking them the questions you want to know. Tune in to learn from the experts so you can get your invention out of the tank and into the bank.
And as it happens, and as I'm sure you and your listeners know well, the first thing that occurs to you is that something is missing, that something maybe important is missing. And the second thing that sort of reluctantly occurs to you, if you have any humility, do you think that I could find it? Could I find the thing that's missing?
As I chat with inventors every week, I ask them, what is your biggest challenge as an inventor? And here's the two most common responses I get. Number one, I just feel stuck right now. I just don't know what to do, and I feel like I need some help. Or number two, I worry that I'm off track. I just don't know if I'm doing the right things. Well, if this describes you, you really are looking to get unstuck and on track, right? Well, here's the good news. I have a brand new free webinar coming your way very soon called Get Unstuck and On Track for 2026. But you need to register pretty quickly because it's coming up this Thursday, December 4th. So briefly, what will you learn in this totally free webinar? You're going to learn 6 specific actions you can take to get unstuck and on track now. These actions I've taught my coaching students over the last 5 years, and they're proven to put you on a solid track for success. I'd love for you to join us, once again, coming up this Thursday, the 4th of December at 8 p.m. Eastern. How do you register? Super simple. Just email me at alan@alanbeckley.com. Then that's ALAN@ALANBECKLEY.com. And then in the subject line, put Get Unstuck in 2026 or Get Unstuck. I will reach out to you, get you the details, and get you set up to attend our Get Unstuck and On Track for 2026 webinar. Totally free. You'll get a lot of value out of it. Once again, to register, just email me at alan@alanbeckley.com, and in the subject line, put Get Unstuck in 2026. And I look forward to meeting you on Thursday evening. Welcome to episode number 566. Today is a rebroadcast of one of our classic favorites, episode number 493, back to March 17th of 2025, with uber successful inventor Garrett Brown. Garrett invented Zeen, an amazing multifaceted chair that assists many confined in wheelchairs to stand and even to walk safely. I think you're going to enjoy this episode as much as I did. Garrett Brown is best known as the inventor of the Oscar-winning Steadicam camera stabilizer, which he used to notable effect on nearly 100 movies, including Rocky and The Shining. In 1974, Stanley Kubrick predicted that the Steadicam should revolutionize the way movies are shot, and that's exactly what happened. Directors, producers, actors, writers, awards committees, and academics have called it one of the 2 most important innovations in the history of filmmaking, and it's earned Garrett 3 Oscars, 5 Emmys, and a galaxy of other accolades over Steadicam's 50 years. Brown holds 120 patents, many for camera devices such as Skycam, the camera you see flying by wires above NFL games. His latest is for a co-invention, the electronic Steadicam upgrade called the Volt, that has just been awarded an Emmy. Garrett has recorded for MGM as a folk singer, made TV commercials and films for Sesame Street, and was the other half of the ad-lib duo on the long-running Molson radio commercials, named by Ad Age as one of the 100 best ad campaigns of the 20th century. He's a member of the American Society of Cinematographers, the Directors Guild, the Screen Actors Guild, and the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences. He made his way by innovation decade after decade as cult-inspiring ad man and humorist, award-winning inventor, sports broadcasting revolutionary, and medical device disruptor. When existing practices got in his way, Garrett dreamed up startling elemental solutions that altered the look and the economics of entire industries, including, most recently, the elegant new mobility device called Zeen, named one of Time magazine's best inventions of 2023. You'll want to listen to this entire interview where Garrett shares how his unique Zeen mobility device allows disabled people to easily stand to their natural height and even walk comfortably. He describes a variety of both medical and psychological advantages for people in wheelchairs to comfortably be able to stand at eye level and socialize with others. And finally, that when inventors create products that they don't personally want, they often invent something that no one wants. Now let's get right to our interview with Garrett Brown. Garrett Brown, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast with us today.
Likewise, happy to be here. I like your mission, and I'm happy to help.
Thank you so much. Garrett, could you share a bit of your background with our listeners? Where did you grow up and go to school, and what did you do before you became an inventor? Could you share that with us?
I had a rather circuitous route to inventing. When I was a sickly kid, I was in bed for 6 months with a nephritis when I was 9, which is a terrible time to be immobilized. But I read the World Book Encyclopedia and was a reader, thank God, and read everything in sight. And at 9, you remember a great deal of what you read. So, of course, ask me anything about Newtonian physics. But my dad invented something that earned DuPont a lot of money, and he talked up inventing. But I wasn't convinced. They made fun of inventors when I was a kid. Gyro Gearloose, Donald Duck's uncle, and the newsreels made fun of inventors. So I became a folk singer, which is a job that I loved in the 60s. And then drifted into the movie business when folk singing went away, when the Beatles showed up. And in the movie business, which I learned by reading film books in the Philly library, I became a 1940s filmmaker because the books were out of date. I loved moving cameras. I had a 800-pound camera dolly, which is what you needed to move cameras smoothly in that era. And being 3,000 miles from Hollywood and with this antiquated technology, I probably had the biggest incentive in the country to try and make handheld shooting smooth. Loved handheld, hated the way it looked. And a very long story short, a few years later, I had a device that worked. Remember, I speak Newtonian physics, and that's what this particular thing was all about. It was called the Steadicam. It's in use in the movie biz all around the world. I shot 100 movies with it myself, and it got an Oscar right off the bat. It was a remarkable first outing and unusually successful for a first try. But I like the act of inventing and still do.
Well, Garrett, that's an amazing story. And it illustrates, now that I've had over 400 podcasts and talked to so many different inventors, that almost every inventor has a somewhat diverse background. So far, I've never had somebody come on who said, I've just been a CPA my entire life, and then one day I decided to invent something. Not that couldn't happen, but more typically, it's more like your circumstance where you were influenced by your dad being a successful inventor, but at the same time, that kooky inventor mentality was floating around. And unfortunately, I think it still is today. But nonetheless, you became a folk singer. You did a variety of different things. You got into filmmaking, and this led you to developing the Steadicam, which is an amazingly successful invention. I'd like to highlight into that a little bit, or segue into our next question, that you're truly a serial inventor with 120 patents to your name. So congratulations for that.
Yeah, thanks.
And you're particularly known for your inventions we just talked about, the Steadicam that revolutionized filmmaking. But in today's episode, I want to focus on one of your more recent inventions. It's a mobility device called the Zeen. And in essence, the Zeen allows those with disabilities to regain increased mobility and autonomy to improve their lives. Can you briefly share with our listeners the aha moment, that event that happened that caused you to invent the Zeen?
If you mean aha moment in the sense of somebody leaping out of the bath and with an invention fully formed in their mind, that's not me. I always poke around in the mist. I get motivated to try and invent something, but I've never had, actually, I've only had one that arrived full-fledged as an idea. But the incipient task of inventing the Zeen, it had its origins in watching my dad as he was declining. The same dad who invented this hot melt for DuPont. And his cohort on walkers and wheelchairs had tremendous difficulty with those things. Walkers are slow and demeaning and put you at fall risk and not great for your shoulders and so on. Wheelchairs are a one-way ticket to not walking. If you're a walker and you give up and end up in a wheelchair, that's not encouraging for getting back to walking. And I had a lot of time with this crowd sitting and watching and thinking about this. And as it happens, and as I'm sure you and your listeners know well, the first thing that occurs to you is that something is missing, that something maybe important is missing. And the second thing that sort of reluctantly occurs to you, if you have any humility, do you think that I could find it? Could I find the thing that's missing? You don't need to invent it on the spot. You need to have a goal. And then you have a process of analyzing the nature of what's missing. What might it be? What are the functions that need to happen? I can tell you in the case of the Zeen, and incidentally, it was named as a homage to the original bicycle, the Zeen, that was the pedalless bicycle that Baron von Drees did in 1816. So Zeen, Zeen, that's where it came from, if anybody's wondering. What needs to do is, first of all, allow somebody to effortlessly get up to their feet. I watched his pals have the typical struggle in getting out of low chairs and onto their feet. It needs to provide support once you're on your feet, because there are people at fall risk from, you name it, knee buckles, fainting, whatever. I watched them fall in my dad's facility. So you need some fall protection. It's handy if you have access out in front. As you see, I'm adding up a list of things that this thing should probably do. It shouldn't be out in front of you because a lot of lifestyle things require you to have access out front. Where are we with this? It lifts that should allow you to walk safely. And while you're at it, why not let you coast? Because coasting is a wonderful human phenomenon. And it feels great, and you really cover the ground. And if you're coasting without the risk of falls, that's exhilarating. Let's have a little joy in this equation. So I think that pretty much sums up what I decided was missing, and I decided to go after it. That was let's see, my dad died in 2013, and by 2015, I had a couple of partners, and we were going after this thing hammer and tongs. I financed it myself in the beginning.
Thank you for giving that clear description and walking us through step by step. First of all, what you saw with your dad's experience as he was aging and then having to deal with mobility problems. And you brought up so many key points and phrases. I've never thought of it quite like this way, but my dad used a walker in his elder years. And indeed, walkers are dangerous, and they tend to be a fall risk no matter how well they try to make them. And I'd never heard the term about a wheelchair that it's a one-way ticket to not walking, but I could see how that would be.
Based on that experience with my dad, because I've conceived of this thing as a geriatric device. And it actually turns out to be of enormous interest to the disabled, to people with two categories of disability. One are people who are declining because of a disability, such as people with muscular dystrophy or cerebral palsy or Parkinson's or MS. Another category of disabled who are coming back from an injury or a stroke. And those upward and downward curves meet in the middle. And the disabled, unlike the geriatric crowd, are wild for change. The elderly are a little change averse, a little conservative in those terms. And the money for a device of this sort seems like what they used to pay for a car to somebody who's elderly. The disabled are intent on improving their lives, and they have turned out to be a tremendous market for the Zeen. And the stories that come back to us, particularly from the disabled crowd, are heartwarming, are heart-rendingly great. These testimonials for this device filling this gap and being time after time, person after person, life-changing. And I never imagined being in that kind of realm of providing something that was that important. And let's face it, the Steadicam is a fluffy invention. It's the movie business. It doesn't change lives. I created a much cherished profession of Steadicam operating, but the Zeen is different. The Zeen has a material effect on your well-being, your satisfaction, and at times your contentment with life. That's something.
Now, that's obviously a big something. You're really changing people's lives in such a meaningful way. And this being a podcast and listeners not being able to see it, can you give our listeners a bit of a visual reference by describing what the Zeen looks like? And also, how does it function to help those whose mobility is limited, particularly those in wheelchairs? And lastly, is it completely mechanical or does it require electricity to use?
First of all, let's try and get a mental picture of this thing as you requested. We call it somewhat whimsically a chair that gets up and goes. So picture kind of an office chair, an interesting looking one, but plausibly an office chair with 4 casters. The seat is configured so that the front of it is like a saddle. It has a prow, and it has a very clever seat belt that docks magnetically when you're not using it, because seat belts are disregarded all the time because they're a pain in the neck. They disappear down behind you and so on. So we made a seat belt that its value is obvious and its function is easy. So picture yourself sitting on this seat. There's a nice backrest, there are arm rests and so on. It has hidden handlebars that swing forward that are laying down beside you, and they click into place. And out at the end of the handlebars are a couple of brake levers. Are you with me so far? Building a mental picture.
You're doing a great job. Yeah, keep up the good work.
The seat is soft. The backrest is soft. It's comfortable. You're at a seated height with nothing in front of you, so you could be at a table. You have 4 casters. So unlike, let's say, automobiles, which we're familiar with, that have fixed rear wheels and steerable front wheels, to maneuver, you don't have to back and go forward and back and go forward and so on. You can go sideways with a Zeen. You can spin it in its own location. And that is a gloriously happy thing to be able to do, to be able to spin in its own length. However, 4-wheel casters are a nightmare for having a consistent course, because they tend to drift in all directions, right? And one of the inventions involved in the Zeen that a partner of mine came up with, which is very valuable, is a dual state caster for the rear wheels, which when you're going forward, the axis of the caster leans a little forward, and therefore it really wants to track straight. The instant you go backwards, by the time you're halfway into backing up, the axle has become vertical and it behaves like 4-wheel casters. So when you go sideways, it's in 4-wheel mode. And when you are going forward, it's tracking like a dream. That's will become important later. Okay. All right. Now we want to help you get to your feet. At the tip of the armrests are a couple of levers, and they allow the Zeen to be unlocked in position. It has a lifting adjustment, which is set more or less to 75 or 80% of your weight, which is a lot. And therefore, getting up from a seated position is almost effortless. You can do it with your arms or with your arms and your legs. So when you squeeze those levers, it's free to go up and down. And you can stop at any height all the way up to your preset standing height. So if you want to go part way up, you can. Your preset standing height, you can go all the way to it and it stops, and you release those levers and it's locked there. That standing height, incidentally, is what we charmingly call bar stool height. Because when you want to go up on the Zeen, you slide a little forward on that saddle so your feet are on the ground right under you. You go up to whatever height you want. If you're at, quote, bar stool height and want to hang out with your friends, there are 2 footrests permanently on the Zeen. You stick your feet on the footrest and slide back in the seat, and you are there at the sociable altitude of our society. Eye level with your friends, eye level talking to them, rather than sitting in a wheelchair and peering up at their belly button. This stuff is important. The benefits of being upright. May I digress for a minute about the health aspect?
Sure.
It helps against obesity. It helps cardiac health. It's an anti-diabetic phenomenon to be upright to an extent. It helps with back pain. It gives you more energy. It helps with your digestive health, your muscle tone, your bone density. It's extremely useful against pressure sores because your positions are changing. You're not perpetually in one spot on a seat. And as we just said, your psychological well-being is fantastically augmented by having not just horizontal mobility, but vertical mobility. You can tell that I have acquired a passion for this thing as I've watched its effect on people's lives. I can't ever say that I had a passion for the Steadicam, or for that matter, for the Skycam that flies over football games. They're intriguing and fun and valuable. But this is different. This is something else. And now that you're at bar stool height, if you once again put your feet on the ground, you can walk. The forecasters effortlessly move in any direction and spin around, as I said. And you walk with part of you at least on the saddle and the seatbelt, so that if you stumble or if your knees buckle, you don't fall and you do not get hurt. It won't fall backwards or sideways or forwards. And then, as I mentioned, if you begin to stride forward and pick your feet up between each step, you are coasting. And on decent surface, a good floor or a good sidewalk, you can really cover the ground. And of course, you've got brakes and you've got parking brakes and all that stuff. So who can do this? Somebody that has a vestige of walking ability can do this. It's not for somebody who is literally paraplegic and has no use of their legs, although we're considering models that might help with that. It's for people that don't want to lose what they still have or want to recover more of what they're getting back. It's for people that want to arrest the decline that happens when you're immobile and when you're seated. I think I should stick a comma at least in here, Alan, because I've spoken too long at a stretch. Go ahead. Where does this leave us? Have you got a picture of this thing? When it's upright, it looks like a very nice, elaborate bar chair that you might have at a bar, except it gets up and goes.
Now, I think you've made it very clear, and I particularly like a couple of the key points you made, and one of them is that eye level is very helpful because people in wheelchairs are very frequently, as you said, looking at people's navels and such because they're at an uncomfortable height it's just difficult for socialization. But when people are at their standing height, what you call the bar stool height, it's just so much better in so many ways. And you spoke to, from a medical perspective, how being able to stand and being upright and et cetera solve so many problems. So yeah, I think that gives our listeners a clear picture. And I also would recommend to any of our listeners to go to the website. I believe it's Zeen, Zen.com, right?
No, not quite. It's GoZeen, GoZeen.com, GoZeen.com. Yes, you'll see not only images of it, but a great deal more info, including a little documentary on how this all happened. And of course, if you're contemplating inventing or being an inventor, the process is of great interest. It's still of interest to me after all these years, I'm still fascinated by how you get from a notion to a thing, a product. Easy, but delightful. When you have a good idea, there's nothing finer than that. When you have an inkling that something you alone know might be needed by the world, that is really fine as well. And you've done this,
Absolutely. So my other question as we roll a little bit towards the end is approximately what is the retail price point of a zine? And are there agencies or organizations that can help with funding the cost? And then I guess lastly, does Zeen have any competitors that are of any significance that you're aware of?
No, it still has no competition, which is delightful. And that says something about how, first of all, unique it is. It's not a minor tweak on something that exists. So no, there's no competition. And obviously, we have a decent patent portfolio and would defend it. What was your other question? The price. It is in the high 4,000s when you get a zine and the odd accessory. I've seen zine sales that go to 5,000 with every possible thing. For instance, we make a one-handed version in case you only have function in one hand or arm. And that one hand can lift it up and down and put on all the brakes. And yes, there is a foundation funded to help people buy them, and which will fund 50% of a zine. And my understanding is that the VA funds these things, and there are more every day other opportunities for funding for it, because the funders have embraced it as something that's really valuable and incidentally will help prevent vast expense in the future if you completely are unable to walk. Haven't got it. What is the expression? Help me out here. What is the expression when it's certified, blah, 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 and paid for by Medicare? It's not to that state. We're
like FDA approved or whatever.
Yeah, something like that. It's labeled and listed with the FDA, but they don't fund it at the moment. My aging brain has just lost the key word here, but I think you know what I'm talking about. We're chasing that, and that's a process, and that would be nice, but it has to have its own category because it's so different. So it's not just an improved walker, let's say. We're getting to that.
As we roll towards a close, I'd like to ask, are there any parting words you'd like to leave us with?
I am a huge fan of inventing. I'm a big fan of citizen inventing. I'm a huge fan of personal inventing. Don't just put up with some annoying aspect. Do something about it. If you have an idea, have it built just for you. That's a great start. I would advise people not to invent things that they don't personally want. I think wanting it yourself is a hedge against inventing something that nobody wants. If you want it, there likely will be others. If you're inventing just to make money, that's not a very valuable thing, not productive. Yeah. And a great deal of disappointment can come from that. Don't invent because you think you'll make a fortune. Invent because you or somebody dear to you or known to you really wants something, you're on much firmer ground. And the very worst case, if you figure it out, you'll have one. Yeah, that's a good way to go.
I particularly like the phrase that you said that it's important that you should want it yourself because this is a hedge against inventing something that nobody is going to want.
Yeah, that's true.
My final question, how can our listeners reach you if they have other questions or would like to find out more about the zine?
The easiest way to reach me is there's a contact page on my website, which is garrettbrown.com, GARRETTBROWN.com. And there is a contact page that will port a query through to me, but also they can be in touch with me. I'm still the chief innovation officer of Exokinetics, the company that makes the zine, and you can get through to Exokinetics via their sales page on gozine.com. So I'd suggest the first stop be gozine.com. I am quite happy to answer questions or try to be of help to people too.
That's fantastic. And again, just to recap what you were just saying, but they can find you at garrettbrown.com, GARRETT Brown, BROWN.com, and also can easily access via GoZeen, GOZEEN.com. Garrett, I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast with us today and sharing this amazing product that truly is world changing and helping people that need a lot of help and that can help them really have a better life. And isn't that what we want to do as an inventor, to create something that matters enough that it's actually going to make somebody else's life better in clear and provable ways? So I think this is a great product for that. Just encourage my listeners to go check it out as I did. I went and watched some of the videos, which makes it very clear how it works, by going to gozeen.com. And lastly, I'd like to reserve the opportunity, maybe another 6 months or a year, to touch bases with you again and see what you've got going on at that time. And maybe the next time we can talk a little bit more about Steadicam and some of your other innovations.
All right. Happily get in touch and we'll do it.
You bet. Once again, thanks for being on the podcast with us. Thanks so much for tuning in to Inventors Helping Inventors. If you like the show, please tell your friends about it. Make sure to subscribe in iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts so you won't miss a single episode. Talk to you soon.